So, uh, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Grill Country. I know a lot of you were waiting for the conversation with Richard Rowland on Christians and RPGs this morning. Richard had got a flat tire this morning and was either start really late and be pressed for time or reschedule, so we opted to reschedule. So look forward to that conversation coming on Thursday morning. About 8 o'clock Eastern. And I am going to go ahead and if anybody wants to come in and talk about, the topic we were going to talk about was about Christians and role-playing games. So if anybody wants to come in and talk about this little corner and how, and its connection with role-playing games and how many people in TLC are gamers and what we think about Christians playing role-playing games, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link, and if anybody shows up, we can talk. And I'm going to try and drag Slack in here, actually, because I know he was waiting. He's so reluctant. He's camera shy. All right, well, if that's... Well, let's see. Let me just talk. I guess I'll just monologue for a bit just to give some time and see if there's anyone who wants to. I let me talk about my own history with role playing games. So, I've been playing role playing games since I was 10 years old. I was fed a steady diet of George MacDonald, C.S. Lewis, and Tolkien as a very young child. That's what my mom read to me. And I had very severe asthma as a child. And I was, in one of my hospitalizations, I was kind of offered a opportunity for a sympathy gift because I'd had a very severe asthma attack that landed me in Children's Hospital in Seattle. That they had to they had to get me there by helicopter urgently because I'd had a spontaneous pneumothorax that had gone undetected for some time somehow because of medical incompetence in the hospital in Grace Harbor where I was in Aberdeen. That's where I'm from. And I had been looking at Boys Life magazine in the hospital that had an ad for Dungeons and Dragons, and it immediately captivated me, and I was like, I want that game. And that's what I asked for. So I got a version. I got an edition. I got the Molde Basic D&D set as a gift, and I tried to figure out. Actually, I got it while I was still in the hospital, and my mom, God bless her, tried to figure out how to play it with me. We had no idea what we were doing. We did our best, but the funny thing about role-playing games is that when you've never played a role-playing game before, it's very hard just by reading the rules to figure out how the game is actually played. Because when you haven't seen the method, it's not evident from what's on the printed page. So I kind of after I got out of the hospital, I kept reading it, trying to figure it out, set it aside for a while. And then it turns out that my mom came and told me that she found out that the neighbors had a son who was older than me who played. He was So by this time I was like 11, and the neighbor boy was 14, and he had a younger brother who's actually one of my best friends. Who he's actually my catering business partner too. His name is Shane. Shane's he was a year younger than me, or maybe two. Is he a year or 2 years? He's younger than me. I think he's almost 2 years, not quite 2 years younger. And so he taught me how to actually play the game. Because like in those days, it's like we did there. I mean, this is like the early '80s, so there was no internet, and there were no streaming shows where you could like watch a stream and see like, oh, so this is how people play that game. So you kind of had to be initiated into it, really, in the old days. And I started playing, and I don't know why it was, but I started running games like, even though I was the youngest player in the group I was playing with. Well, except for Shane, because Rick was the name of the guy who taught me to play, and Shane was his younger brother, so they would sometimes let Shane play, but Rick basically didn't want to let Shane to play, so most of the time Shane wasn't. So when Shane was playing, I wasn't the youngest player, but most of the time I was the youngest player, and they were all high school age kids. But was only playing for a couple months before I ended up running a game, and everybody liked it so much that I became the DM for a much older group of players. And I was basically a full-time DM ever since. Oh, really? So tell me, what does that explain? It's like that explains so much. Like, come in here and tell me what it explains. Well, Fleebish, yeah, great mom. I agree. I love my mom. She's fantastic. And here's the thing. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about with Rick. So this is all like kind of pre-Satanic Panic, right? So my mom is like reading me. She's reading me Tolkien. She's reading me MacDonald. She's reading me Lewis. She buys me Dungeons and Dragons. Everything is fine. And then with it, like 2 years later, after Mazes and Monsters has come out and the Satanic Panic is in full swing, she's, my mom is also like, part of the Assemblies of God. She's a Pentecostal Christian, and she gets really worried about this because that's what her culture is telling her to do, is to be worried about it. So I end up having to like give away my D&D books. And so this is how I got started doing game design. So I've always designed games. I've actually, like, over the years, I've designed, I don't know, it has to be like literally hundreds of games, but they're like usually like small little like micro game kind of projects. I've never completed a large project, but the first one I created a game, and I called it Chivalry in a Dark Age. And I made it so that it could be played with only the D6, so that I could just read the regular board games. And if we were rolling D6s and had paper, it wasn't, and there were no D&D books around, we could be playing without my mom knowing that we were playing. So that's how I started designing games. And so, yeah, that's kind of like how I started playing. And then I've basically been running games most of the time. There was a time where, like, mostly been like a DM most of my life. In the early 90s, when I was in my early 20s, I was again in a group with players that were much older than me, that were most of the other players were in their 40s. And we were playing Beastmen and Gods and Cyberpunk 2020 were the games that group was playing. And I was just a player for about the first, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months that I was with that group. I was just a player. And then I had been wanting to I'd run Pendragon like once before. Because I bought Pendragon in 1988 when I was at a national debate tournament in Berkeley. And I went to this nice big game shop there in Berkeley, and I got a box set of Pendragon First Edition while I was on this debate trip. And I really fell in love with that game. And I ran it for my friends right away. But my friends were kind of like typical, like, gonzo D&D players. And Pendragon's tone is very different. So I was looking for a group to run Pendragon with that would take the tone more seriously, and this older group of players was capable of that, and I saw that in their games. So at some point I pitched running a Pendragon, just to kind of see how it went and see if they liked it. And then they ended up loving it, and I ran Pendragon with that group for about 3 years until I moved away. I transferred to college in California and stopped running the game then because I went to California. So that's the... You didn't know the secret D&D history of... yeah, Shane. That's why Shane... You remember? Yeah, okay, so Slack's bringing up my friend Shane, who he knows. So Shane is like... he's a really big guy. He's like... my son, Kenny, is like 6'5", and wears a size 15 shoe. And my friend Shane is also like similarly dimensioned. He's even wider than my son, though. He's an incredibly like wide, powerfully built human being. He's really like the world's largest hobbit once you get to know him. He loves food. He loves good companionship. And he does have a history of playing D&D and does like D&D. Slack, I don't know if you remember when he was playing the Mafia game with us for a while, which is one of the micro games that I created. I made a game called La Familia, which was a sort of a generational mafia game where you tried to build a mafia crime family over time. And Shane was one of the players when we played around with that for a while. All right, Grim says he's going to come and bail me out so I don't have to continue to monologue. That's good. Slack, you should get in here, man. You can put a filter on or something, you know? You don't have to show your face. But yeah, Shane plays D&D. He actually enjoys it. In fact, Shane was thinking about, I guess I didn't tell you, but Shane was actually thinking about going to North Texas RPG Con with us. He really wanted to. If he just couldn't, he just didn't have the time or the money, but he's interested in coming with us next time if we do it again. So he's like definitely like next year, North Texas RPG Con with the gang is definitely on his radar. So yeah, that's kind of like that's my very long history. So I've been playing since 81, so that's over 40 years. There was a break when my children were very young when I did not play, and then when I wasn't playing, I was buying books, reading books, and thinking about game design ideas. So it's never been like totally not out of my life altogether. Yeah, it's like I know you're not a stream guy, but you do fine. You do fine. So yeah, I think that Slack that that I agree. Yeah, next year I think that's gonna be it's gonna be fantastic. I wonder if we could turn this into a TLC thing. Like, I wonder if we could get people from TLC and convince them to come to NTRPG Con. I guess since I don't have anything else to talk about while I'm waiting for Grim to show up, I'll talk about North Texas RPG Con for a little bit, which goes up. You don't want me to bring my cult to the... No, don't you dare. You don't want me to bring my cult, as you call it, with me to North Texas? I think it's a good idea. I think it sounds like a really great... I mean, it's such a great... North Texas RPG Con. It's such a great experience. It was awesome. It happens in early June. Actually, like usually like end of May, early June. So it's like I think this year it was like May 31st through June 4th. And technically June 1st was the first day of the official day of the con, but there were games in the evening on the 31st as kind of like, pre-con games. And so our first game was on Wednesday evening on the 31st when we arrived. And it's just such it's all about gaming. It's not, a lot of cons have like lots of layers of other things that come with it. And this convention is just people that are actually focused on gaming, that are relaxed and low key and have a good time, and don't have a bunch of, they don't have any agendas to push. They just want to play games and have fun. And I was telling Slack, the coward who won't get in the stream with me, we both were kind of like making the observation about how every table that you're at that con, it's a professional table. Like, it's people that know what they're doing, and it makes things go much differently. And yeah. All right, here we go. All right, are you ready, buddy? Can you give me a thumbs up if you want me to go ahead and bring you in?
Yeah, I gotta set it up to stream over on my channel before.
Oh my god, that was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I gotta.
I don't like monologuing at all. Oh my god, that was not even a little bit.
Yeah, the solo stream is hard, dude. That's why I have so much branding and stuff to run to give me like 3 seconds to pull myself up together. Stop talking for a minute.
Hey, now, I can probably hear you now, right?
You still hear me, yeah?
Yeah, because that was my.
I can't hear you now for some reason.
Oh, really?
This is fascinating.
Weird. Okay.
Drop me back down. I'll sort things out.
Okay. Let me play around with my settings too, just to see. So I think what had happened is that okay, no, my mic's still working. But I know the reason I didn't hear you when you first came in, Graham, is because my wireless headset, when it's not in use, will go idle, and I had been monologuing for sufficient time without anybody else talking, that my headset had gone off. So my mic was still functioning, but my headset was off.
I can hear now.
All right.
So maybe
I think you were fine to begin with, Graham, because my wireless headset, it will go idle in order to save battery life, and because there was no one else for me to listen to, and I was just talking, it just thought it wasn't being used.
Like, all right, then I'll go off if you don't need me.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway,
I'm setting it up to stream over to my channel. You called this like RPG TLC or what? Oh,
TLC are Christians and RPGs. Yeah. So basically, so far, I've just talked about my own history. I did talk about the Satanic Panic for a little bit, which is, I guess, so I have touched on the Christians, and the TLC part I touched on because Slack really loved the suggestion of like trying to turn NTRPG Con into a thing that TLC does.
Yeah,
as you can see from his reaction.
Yeah, very fond of it. All right, we should be on both channels now.
This is where if I weren't a horrible stream coward, I'd have brought up the liturgy of the table. Yeah. Oh, I think that's when I was talking about. I think he's talking about in the context when I was talking about how the players were at the NT RPG Con, how everyone just kind of like knew how it's supposed to be done. Sometimes like when you're playing with a table of people that you've just like put together of various players of various levels of seriousness, like some more casual than others, or it's it's not, you don't have, it doesn't just run, it doesn't run like that. It doesn't run like that where there was no, everyone was automatically a team player and very professional. That's the only word I can think of to use to describe it. But
well, it's I think like the way conventions forming is the same biological mechanic or cultural mechanic, whatever, social mechanic maybe, that results in the formation of churches. Like it's essentially group worship, right?
Which ties to John's notion of the liturgy of the table.
It's like the love of something that we all share, despite whatever differences, brings everybody together.
Yeah. It does have he's not, it's what he's talking about isn't crazy. Like there's a way in which like it has a ritual and a liturgical kind of character to it, because there's like, this connects to Grimm when I was talking about when I first got the Moldvay basic set when I was a kid, and I tried to read the books and figure out how to play. I couldn't. You can't, because it's not, you like learning to play D&D is not something that can be conveyed through propositions.
Why not?
Because you need to see it and do it, and before you actually get what it is. You can do that nowadays. This is true. Okay, this is true. Nowadays you can, because you can watch people do it on YouTube and you have some idea. But the actual, not the game, you can understand the mechanics, but understanding the mechanics is different from understanding the procedure. The method of how you play D&D is not evident from the page without seeing anybody do it.
True, but that's, I think, like a failure on their part to establish a proposition. Like, if you look at some of the intros to the White Wolf games back in the day, they did a really good job of explaining what the game itself was.
Yeah, those games were a radical, like in the history, they were such a radical advancement in the quality of what the writing and art was expected to be in a role-playing game. It was so much far above anything that had come before it in terms of how good the actual prose was and how good the art was, that it just raised the bar, and all role-playing games after it have had to aim at a higher bar because of it. Even though it's not a game that ever really captured my imagination or that I played a lot of, because I just wasn't interested. But I still bought the book and read the book and was like impressed with it from a design standpoint.
Sherry, good to see you.
Yeah, Sherry.
The farmer RPG and the wife RPG. That's kind of why I would actually recommend RPGs to folks that aren't familiar, is because so much of our reality is an RPG. Like, when you're going to work, you're playing the role of whatever the hell your job is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's I think they break minds. Like I said, when I went on my first thing with Pastor Paul, I started playing when I was 8, even though the box told me it was like for older kids. And
right. Who were you? Okay, so you started playing 8. That's very young. My son started at 5 because his dad's an old grognard. But typically, that's really young.
It was really neat because the DM was my friend's brother. Like, my age con-specific friend had an older brother, and he would be our DM. Gotcha. So it was also like a way for the older kids to like teach us weird stuff. Mm-hmm. Like I remember one of the first games we were playing, just the notion that people sweat in their sleep, and that like the beds were stinky because we went into this room and it was like an ogre's den, but they weren't there. And so like this older human explained to me like that just real world concept through the game. Gotcha, and there's a lot of that, a lot of like subtle world understanding that the DMs and the players pass to each other. Like when the players try to solve a problem, like those solutions are coming. It's sort of a distributed cognition in the hypothetical.
Yeah, there's a D&D YouTuber that I watch occasionally who had a video recently where he was talking to a British psychologist who actually has started to use role playing games to treat depression in his patients. So like he developed like he had to develop his own kind of system because he needed something that you could actually get somewhere in an hour long session with a patient, right? So he had to design something that suited the actual like treatment environment where you don't have 3 hours, with your patient. So he tried to develop something where you could actually get something done in only a 1 hour session. But he's using role playing games to work with his patients, specifically depressed patients. So.
Well, one interesting, I've had DMs that try to adjust players' character, like not the characters of the player or not the characters of the game that the player is running, right? But the way that so like the DM essentially, the dungeon master, the game master, essentially creates a world in his imagination and lets his friends come in to play inside it, and like. The sense it's not real, since it's the hypothetical situation, people playing will choose to embody different aspects of themselves, perhaps as a method of shadow work, right? Mm-hmm. And so while you're running around being the deviant you truly are on the inside in the DM's mind, like he can punish you the way that the universe writes our stories for us. It's like the game master takes over the role of, and really helps people. Well, I don't know, helps, right? It might be actually hurts people understand the way God works in the universe. But it's like because you're doing things that are morally objectionable to the master of the game, he might throw guards that are way beyond your level to punish you and kill your character. And so you learn the hard way that some of your impulses have consequences and you wouldn't have explored those impulses at all.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of explore is a good word, right? Because there's a lot of I think the game is about exploration in multiple senses. Like first of all, there's always been an exploration pillar of the game where it's like you're exploring a space and finding out what's there and discovering. And that's exploration, but you're exploring when you're playing a character. That's also an exploration. Like you're finding out something about yourself as you play that character, for sure. No doubt.
Yeah, it's like I think I've been accused of having integrity, and to the extent that's happened, I think that it's been developed because when you're in the hypothetical situation where there is no consequences. And you you know what? I'm going to stand up for what's right and see what the dice do to me.
Yeah.
Whereas,
no, I think that it's a way of practicing courage. I really think that's a big part of it. Particularly, I mean, especially depending on the tone of the game. But if the tone of the game is right, it can definitely be an exercise in practicing courage, for sure. I definitely see that. So I want to go back a little bit though. So you started playing when you were 8. So what edition did you? What game was it? Was it D&D or was it a different game?
I think it was advanced, and then
D&D, yeah.
But we also
So you're talking mid 80s, right?
Yeah. I was probably 84, 85.
Yeah.
And we jump into Marvel and stuff, and of course, and this is a fascinating aspect.
You played the Marvel superheroes game?
Oh yeah, I loved it because they had the big fancy percentage tables on the back of
each with the color coding.
And anytime you tried to do a move, it was how high up into that.
Do you know what the acronym for that system is?
No.
Phase rip.
I see why no one says it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And, but yeah.
It's just, but all right, this is particularly with a modern game, right? like I recall like back in the 80s when we were creating our characters that one of the options was to go into robotics, like especially in the superheroes games. But like everything was like at a -40 because like robotics were so primitive then.
Right, right.
But if I had like passed my life based on that fact that I had learned from the like if I get in robotics now, then where would it, yeah, what a mistake. But the no, that's actually something I wanted to get into is like Thaco, yeah, like when I
Thaco
started
forever.
DMing. When I started DMing, it was second edition. It's the good stuff. But it's like particularly with a modern game, and you're taking children who don't know the world. They're nescient to the world. Is like like just the skill trees of what's out there, like broaden the horizons of that child's possibility. Just because they didn't know those skills existed or that humans did those things.
Do you think that playing role playing games enhances trade openness?
Openness. I'm not going to tie it to the traits, right? But I will say that, like, there's been research I've read as reported that reading books makes people more empathic. And I would suggest that role playing games do that even stronger than reading a book does.
Yeah, because you literally have to try to put yourself in the shoes of another person, at least one other person, if you're a player. And if you're a GM, you're trying to have to adopt all kinds of different perspectives.
Yeah, it's like a leveling up your theory of mind, right? That's a stage of human development is when that thing also has a mind like me, right?
Yeah.
And then this is like imaginative play that leans into the development of that ability. Especially at like if you take on the role of becoming a dungeon master, you have to like determine the motives of the villains and the way they achieve their means.
Yep.
And as such, as you go off in the world, you have like that perspective that other people would never consider.
Yep. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, 100%. So,
Go ahead.
you said you started. How old were you when you said you started running when you were in second edition? How old were you when you started running games?
Well, I had one successful campaign shortly, like major, like life dedication, like, and that happened probably 8th, 9th grade after I got to Oklahoma.
Okay.
But like that place, I made like entire continents, like with.
So you really enjoy the world building part of it?
Oh yeah, and then letting people see what they do to it.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. I have like um, I have, I never really. I have a little bit of. I don't know. My daughter thinks I have ADD, but I have a tendency to like. I have a tendency to like you spend a lot of effort onto a project up to a certain point, and then it's like, nah, I can do better than this. And then rather than just try to improve what's there and edit it, I just start over from scratch again and start rewriting from the beginning.
Isn't it fascinating just as a natural occurrence? How many people that go from playing to dungeon mastering move on to trying to develop their own system? And what do you think of that? Like, what's that character? Is it a character trait? What is it? Why does that happen?
I think I don't. It seems like it's just people that like to tinker, right? So it's like what comes first is house ruling some other system. So that's the first step. So it's like you would start messing with certain subsystems of the game. It's like, yeah, I like D&D, but I don't like the way Vancian magic works, so I'm going to introduce like a mana point system or a roll to cast system or something like that in order to like change it up because I don't like this particular subsystem of the game. Or I want there to be like I like the idea of there being a chart that you roll on when you have a critical hit instead of just doing double damage or whatever. So it starts with like house ruling whatever game it is that you started with. And then from that kind of, and once you get a feel for like, oh, I can make house rules that actually work and everybody seems to like, then I think from there it goes to like, well, maybe I could build the system from the ground up. In my case, I was driven by necessity to create a system at a very young age. And what I did is try to basically create something. So I was doing two things in that game. First of all, I was taking out I actually like the parts. Here's the funny thing is like the parts of the game that my mom was worried about, I didn't really like or engage with anyway. I was playing paladins all the time, So it's like I wasn't playing magic users. I was playing paladins. I was all about like, fighting evil and doing that kind of thing. And I've been reading Arthurian literature from like a very young, like almost as soon as I can read. So the game I created was called Chivalry in a Dark Age. It was more focused around like knightly types fighting against evil, and I designed it so that it could be played with a D6 only. So it was a D6 based system instead of a D20 based system. And basically, had to all use D6. Everything had to be done with D6s so that there didn't have to be any suspicious looking polyhedrals around.
You mean platonic forms? Sacred geometry? Like that's one of the fun things, right? It's like you play D&D your whole life and then you learn about sacred geometry and like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's
the dodecahedron. I actually had to learn when I was in Thomas Aquinas College, the freshman year math class at Thomas Aquinas College is you learn Euclid from Euclid's Elements. And so, like the big challenging, culminating event is actually the dodecahedron proof. So and everybody calls it the Death Star, but it also is a T20. So, there we would have T-shirts about like I survived the Death Star, things like that. So it's like a rite of passage at Thomas Aquinas.
All right, you remember how I was talking about how the existence of skill trees, particularly in modern games, can orient a person to what's actually available, or like things. Similarly,
I just found out something recently. By the way, did you the skills are actually been in games longer than I realized. Apparently they're actually Empire of the Petal Throne, which is depending on who you ask. Is potentially the second role playing game ever published, and TSR actually published it. And Empire of the Petal Throne actually had skills.
Well, like classes are
in 1975. In 1975, it had, this had actually skills, and actually the classes would have their own specific skills within the class too. Mm-hmm. So there would be like kind of general skills that were based on your social standing that you would have access to, right? So, like, people that were plebeian class would have access to different skills than people who were noble class. And then your actual character class. And there were only 3 of them. Because it was on the ODD model of, like, Magic User Fighting Man and...
Magic User Fighting Man!
Magic User Fighting Man and Cleric were the original classes. There wasn't a Thief until Greyhawk was published in April of 1975.
As it works, though, this stream is titled TLC Christians and RPGs. So I want to get into how, I mean, you can go specifically with Dungeons and Dragons for their model because of popularity and mimetic penetration, right? But the way they do their planes of existence still works for me.
Oh, like, you're talking about the way the planes of existence in D&D?
Yeah, like D&D is interesting because like the gods all play except like the DM is the god above the gods. Mm-hmm. And like they don't really do Christianity because like the Christianity we're familiar with the gods don't actually do anything, and in the game, or God doesn't actually do anything, and in the game, like the gods take a more role, right?
Right. So the game, I think, so these games are reflecting the characteristics of a mythic age, right? And there's not a better way to put this. The reason that the reason that it needs to have the gods do things is that it's emulating what you see in the mythic, and what you see in the mythic comes from from an original participation consciousness, which just looks at the reality differently than we do. And so, like, that's going to be a polytheistic world, like, by its nature.
Because
because the development of monotheism amongst the Hebrews is kind of like the beginning of withdrawal participation, which isn't a bad thing.
They stole it from Akhenaten.
Well, monotheism is not the same thing. Like, here's the thing. This is the thing. It's like, oh boy, dude, how are we getting into this?
We're not. But we got Corey Cobell saying narrative emergence, and that's a TLC term. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, then you get into the whole thing about, I mean, because this is actually where we're going right now. We're gonna end up colliding with the entire, like, Exodus argument that happened about whether Judaism and Christianity are monotheistic or not, in a strict sense. And I would
never. I would say Exodus is how you train a global mafia. Hey, why don't we run this commercial? Let's see if I can present the tab still, if you'll let me.
Go for it.
I am not supposed to be here. The person who is supposed to be here is responsible for this.
Oh yes. Let's give him some love here.
Oh wait, that's not showing. Stop it. All right. Stop it. All right, bring it up, Nate. You got to do that as the host.
Oh, okay. I will bring it up.
Emboria, a world 20 years in the making. Strange Owl Games is excited to bring you Emboria, role-playing in the world under starlight. From the mind of Richard Rowland, co-host of the Amantul podcast and Medieval Universal History on the Symbolic World. In Emboria, Richard's deep love of symbolism, poetry, and history meet to offer a gaming experience like none other. In this rich and unique fantasy world, adventurers fight monsters, uncover ancient secrets, and find themselves immersed in the stories and legends of another place and time.
I had to stop it. Like, who can do these kind of visuals? Do we have this skill? Do we have lobster monkeys that can do these sorts of visuals in the corner?
I'm pretty sure.
Terribly impressive.
A reputation and influence grows, they find themselves thrust into the crossfire of political machinations in a kingdom on the edge of ruin. Powered by the clash system used in Jackal's Bronze Age fantasy role-playing, Emboria provides fast, intuitive, and reactionary rules for combat, travel, and building your community. The clash system was already famous for its fast and deadly combat. We've taken this dynamic system and integrated the liturgical and poetic depths of the world under starlight directly into the game mechanics.
Dun, dun, dun.
Emboria, role-playing in the world under starlight. Back it today.
Henotheistic. What's heno? Why are you making up new words? We got mono and poly, and now you're saying heno occupy, Mike? What the heck?
I agree with that comment.
Well, why don't you explain henotheistic for the people who aren't word
Sure.
guys.
In henotheism, the argument is it's not the contention is that God is God is presented as the highest of gods, and the proper pinnacle of the hierarchy. Although God in the proper sense is beyond hierarchy at the same time. So, but for the sake
So it's
of
a higher plane of existence.
one might say that's a way of thinking about it, but that the other gods are still real. But when they're not properly ordered under the highest god, they can create problems. So they're not necessarily so there are dark aspects that can come with the lower gods. Spirit of spirits. That's a good way of putting it.
Source of source. What?
Elohim
That brings up the chain of command question. Really, particularly, like with the Gnostics saying that the demiurge is the one that created this particular world, but like still that this God of gods or God's still way above him.
Well, let's think about that for a moment. So it's like, okay, yeah, that to say that it's actually created by the demiurge is Gnostic, but it's perfectly orthodox to say that it's ruled by
Right.
an archon. So that's not far off.
Right.
Because it's still an evil archon that is in control of this plane that we're on.
Which brings us to the spiritual Sardaukar point, right? Like, why are we here? They sent us here in this place ruled by this archon, so we came out hard. Like we're the shock trooper, the spiritual shock troopers.
Which brings us back. Which brings us back to what's fun about role playing games, because you get to kind of act that out that fighting against principalities and powers in a very palpable way. And which is what I loved about it from when I first started playing. That's what I said. What did I play? I played paladins. Well, when I rolled the stats for a paladin, my very first character was a ranger, who I very originally named Aragorn.
Oh yes, that's terribly original. I think when we talked about the generation of new systems, a lot of it happens because people play D&D or other games, and then they watch television shows that are different settings, and they're like, well, I think I can adapt, the gaming to this new setting. Space games were the ones that got homebrewed around my clique more than anything else, because there wasn't you could do Jedi ones,
right? Because there just weren't. There historically there have been less good. Did you ever play Traveler?
No.
Okay, so Traveler was the earliest first space opera game. I think Traveler came out in about 1977, and there are people that love Traveler. I played Traveler. Actually, when I first started playing games, I started playing Traveler pretty early on, and the first time I had a character die in character creation, I was like, this game sucks. It's having a character die in creation is just a bad idea.
Die in creation?
But the reason that you can die in while you're creating your character can die in Traveler, in the early editions of Traveler. But the people that love it, what they really love it, is that Traveler lets you get super detailed about your ship that you're running around in with your crew. And Traveler is actually I think Traveler is actually what inspired Firefly, because it has that's what Traveler feels like. It's not like Star Wars. It's more like you're a bunch of space murder hobos going out and getting into trouble.
I hated when I first heard the term murder hobos. It made me feel so guilty about all of the games I had ever been in. Hey, that's what we
being
do.
A murder hobo is a perfectly good exercise. I hope hopefully you end up doing more interest. And even murder. Here's the thing about even the so-called murder hobo can end up doing something that surprises you in a game.
Okay, let's spin this a little bit. Like I said, I got into D&D in 2nd edition. Mm-hmm. When did they bring in the demons? Because I know now. right?
Okay, so
They
this
have
is
the
interesting.
warlocks and the packs and the tieflings. When did the tiefling demon breed come in? Because it seems like a descent.
As a player character.
Yeah. As far as
I
like
think
the
in
good
second
guys losing
edition,
the RPGs. As a player character,
the
no.
playing monsters thing started with second edition. In fact, I can remember making a, I can remember making a Minotaur character in, second edition. But the way I play here's how I played my Minotaur character. This is my
like
Minotaur
paladin,
character.
Right?
Well, yeah, I was I was a lawful good Minotaur. That was basically like I made him like sort of like a Greek hoplite in terms of his fighting style, and I made him like a stoic basically, who was like fighting against always trying to fight against this animal part of his nature that he couldn't control because he was a Minotaur, but he was trying to fight against it. Yeah, that is definitely a like the monsters being characters as player characters is definitely a thing of more modern editions. But it really begins in some of the second edition splat books.
Yeah, I love the splat. Collecting the splat books was like, look, now you can add drow to your game, you know?
Okay, here we go. Slack has the data for us here. So the Tiefling was introduced in the Planescape campaign setting in 1994, so that would be 2E.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, thank you for the very specific detail. You know, what was it? I was going to say something about that. Like, oh yeah, but this is an interesting thing too. Because of the Satanic Panic, they actually they removed all of the the BX version of the game.
BX.
Actually, yeah, BX, which is the basic expert set, which is actually kind of like for whatever reason, the old school Renaissance has kind of fallen on the BX version of D&D as its sort of lingua franca, because it's very clean and it has really, really clearly written rules for dungeon crawling and hex exploration. So, and it's very easy. It's very simple and straightforward compared to AD&D. So it's kind of become for all the old school Renaissance games, it's kind of become the core of most of them. But it didn't have the demons and the devils in the monsters the way it removed them, specifically because of the Satanic Panic. But the thing is they were in the monster manual. They were things to fight against. They weren't, and now in modern editions, it's now they're player races that are basically demons and devils. So
I've heard a lot as relating back to the TLC. I've heard a lot of people think that some sort of virtual interaction with the concepts of the symbolism and even the Reiki Stoicism stuff. People are planning to make games through which we can so for people that don't come get our stuff via YouTube, where there's talk of embedding it into RPGs for people to find. What do you think of that and how it could be accomplished?
Yeah, I think, I think that's actually something I played around with. Yeah, it's an idea that I played around with. As I've said several times, I've been designing games. I've never actually finished a real polished project, but I've been doing it pretty much continuously since I was 12 years old.
Well, if Richard ever finally talks to you, I think if he talks to you about how
we're talking Thursday morning.
It got kicked forward.
Yeah, he got a flat tire this morning, and it was either he was willing to still do it, but we would have been really pressed for time. So I thought it was better to just postpone it. But you were saying,
but if he talks you into doing a Kickstarter for your Pendragon game, then that having the Kickstarter people backing it will probably be enough to force you to finish it.
Now see, here's the thing, Graham. This is the way my mind works. It's I was planning on finishing the project first before trying to Kickstarter it.
That's not the notion of how Kickstarter's even supposed to work.
But it's like, it's something about, like, it's about me. It's like, I don't feel like, hey, back this project that is like only exists in this sort of like draft form that I am not even remotely finished with yet. That seems like, I don't know. That's just like,
well, no, there's probably a stage you'd get it to, but
yeah, I don't think it's there yet. Like right now, all it is like a bare bones outline of. It's basically going to be an OSR. Right, but it is gonna have a.
What's an OSR for everybody who doesn't?
Yeah,
know
the OSR is the old school Renaissance, which is like a movement within gaming that realizes how good we had it in the early days and tries to capture some of the spirit of those games. And some of the OSRs also introduce new things, which is what this one will do. Because it's not gonna just be a straight emulation of any particular old school game. I'm doing some interesting things. Like I'm kind of like tossing out the standard Magic altogether, and I'm introducing like class abilities that some of which will have like a magical or quasi magical effect, but the standard spellbook's getting tossed out.
So you're doing a non-magic world like the one we seem to be appearing in?
No, it's not. No, there's magic. It just doesn't. I'm not using the D&D spellbook because I don't really think that D&D's magic feels right for what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. What do you want to do?
I'm trying to create something that has a little bit more folklore and mythic kind of feel to it. And D&D's magic is like, it's very much inspired by Jack Vance's Dying Earth novels, and it has a sci-fantasy sort of a vibe to it, and it doesn't fit the kind of fiction that I'm trying to create in the Grail Country RPG, which is literally about recovering shards of the Grail in a enchanted world.
Can you tag Sherry's comment and then see what the heck Slack is talking about?
Touche. All right, let's see. This too. Oh, all let's see. What? Oh, did he actually find?
I don't know if he actually found one or if
there is one that uses fudge, I guess. Okay. There is a fudge-based
all right, who requested
Princess Bride RPG? Sherry asked if there
all
was
right, she's got to play with us now. We're going to find it. We're going to put a session together and she's got to play.
I think that's how it should work.
Yeah, we influence each other. We colonize each other in such ways.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the advanced topic. Well, first I want to throw out everybody who's watching either of these streams over on Grail Country or my channel. If you have experience in role-playing games, please indicate so in the comments. As per the following. I've played, I've DM'd, I've designed the campaign, or I've only played computer RPGs. Any of those four categories, if they've touched your life in that way, please let us know in the comments. We're making a list of people we're just making lists of people. You don't need to know what they're for.
Yeah, so we're just compiling lists. Yeah.
But now let's go into what did the rise of computers do to your gaming? Because it destroyed my campaign, my DM campaign. Honestly.
Okay, that's interesting. That is
in the comments, guys, not the chat. The comments. We can't make lists from. It's a pain in the arse to make lists from the comments or from the chat. Please say it in the comments.
Yeah. So for me, I think it didn't really have much impact on me. Maybe I'm trying to think of why. Maybe because of first of all, when games first came out, when the first computer-based RPGs came out, they were like text-based, right? There were things like Zork.
Oh, I still love Zork. That's what playing with playing with the AI chatbot GPT-4, it felt like playing Zork.
Playing Zork,
so much,
yeah.
So much.
Did you ever mess around with MUDs?
No, I skipped those.
So that was kind of like MUDs were kind of basically like a throwback to those early computer video games, but with multiplayer and in the early days of the internet. I messed around with MUDs a little bit, but I think maybe some of my design sensibilities were impacted by it, but I always was more of a tabletop guy, maybe it was the age group of the people that I was playing with, right? So let's say the video games really start to get good in the 90s. And so in the 90s, I was playing with people who were about 20 years older than me on average.
So
weren't really into computer games.
Right, yeah.
So I was actually playing with, they weren't really quite boomers, but they were kind of like close.
See, like as a DM, like I was building my cities and stuff at the same time. Like the computer games were getting deeper and deeper, and it was like, all right. So I looked at it and it was like, you know what? In 5 or 10 years, I'll be able to do like all of these NPCs, and they'll just run their scripts. Like, okay, so the blacksmith is here, and this is what he does during the day. And so if the players are here in town when that happens, then they might encounter these guys or these guys. And like, of course, the computer development did not ever, like, I honestly thought that the tools to help you as a DM would generate like that. And so I was like, well, why am I putting into all this work for it when there's going to be hardware or like it'll be automated in the next 7 years. And so instead, and then I leaned over into actually just playing video games and trying to get close enough to the betas of them to influence the developers to shape the games rather than. And that's kind of how I abandoned my campaign.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think it's been a fairly common fantasy of gamers that I've heard. This is what that was like, that really kind of like wanted to have something of the video game experience like in their tabletop environment, and that's, you can kind of see this is actually like kind of coming to fruition in the new slick Wizards of the Coast virtual tabletop that they're developing, which kind of is like, it really just looks and feels like a video game. And if you, to me, watching the people play with this in the videos of this virtual tabletop, it's horrifying. And here, the reason it's horrifying is because they're all staring at their laptop screens or their tablets, and there's no face-to-face interaction, and it takes all the imagination out of it.
Yeah, I mean, developing your theater of the mind.
Yeah,
and like a shared theater of the mind, really.
Yes, correct.
That's
one of the things that makes the game so awesome. No, we haven't talked about it yet. And that is it. Like it actually, like the game, like it enhances your like imaginative capacity. It makes you use those muscles.
Yeah, and it's like not only that you're using them, but it's almost like a group meditation, but like with the opposite. You're like, as far as it's the opposite of meditation, but at the same time,
you're literally imagining a space together. And you're exchanging information because you don't all see it exactly the same. But as you exchange information about what you're imagining about, then a picture starts to come together where it's like, oh, so part of what you imagine, okay, now I can see that as being part of this too. You know, and the GM is part of that as well. And it's sort of like this communication between the players and the GM that like starts to create this shared vision of like what the space actually is.
Like an imaginative synchrony, achieving harmony. All right, let's get into the hard part.
All right.
I think it's time we meta up RPGs. Like this whole notion I have with the lobster monkeys. as character classes.
Mm-hmm.
In this, it's like I want to design a gaming system, but rather than us rolling the dice, we just do the stuff. And please help extract this from me into a way that might be coherent to anybody.
So some kind of LARP, then?
Well, yes, clearly we're role playing a game and we're alive and acting it out. So, but it's like I'm a channel ship captain, and so are you, and we have the innards of these ships are the discords, and we're in this flotilla, and so I have this whole. This is the game world that's in my shared imaginarium, man, and I'm trying to share it better. Help me pull it out. Ask me questions.
Okay. So I think the first question I ask myself when I am wanting to do a new design, the first question I ask myself is, what is this game about? And I try to write it out in about 500 words. So, because that's going to drive everything else you decide. Because if it like for example, let me just use an example. Like, so old school games are very much about seeking out treasure, because the game incentivizes you to do that because you get experience points for gold. So it becomes like trying to get treasure. It becomes a driving force of the game. And the way people play the game differently because of that, where it's like if players can avoid an encounter and still get the treasure, they're going to do that 100% of the time because there's no reason to take on unnecessary risk. Whereas you take, like, say, a more modern game like 5th edition D&D...
The lust of glory, sir. What are you talking about?
Like, in 5th edition D&D, you get experience points mostly for killing stuff, right? So, like, there's an incentive to engage. There's always an incentive to engage.
I'm going to circumvent the objection in the comments. And it's not necessarily killing stuff. It's dealing with the encounter. Right?
Yes.
Like you could negotiate winning the encounter.
Winning the encounter. Yes.
Not necessarily through murder.
But it's usually murder.
Usually murder, but not necessarily through murder. It's like, they give you the character skills that are functionally the hammer, and when all you have is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. Like, your spells do damage, your stuff do. It's mostly damage dealing abilities they give you.
So I would say, so there's a different, the OSR games are actually what the games are about. They're actually about, like, going into dangerous places and recovering the riches to be found there. That's what they're about. In say a game like 5e, if I wanted to put a positive spin on it, I would say it's about overcoming obstacles.
So, the quick gist of the LARP gate, RAG, it's you've heard of ARGs, but no, this is an RAG using the same words. Is that you live in a world where most people have been subdued by a spell we call as the fourth wall spell. And your characters help bring people out of that sleep and into the information war. Would be the gist, I guess.
Okay.
And so meme magic is the primary magic user classes. What is it? Like, I call it Clip Kings were the ones that did the looming like me, right? For those those juxtaposed
I like
videos.
Meme magic, Clip Kings,
and so, like, understanding, like, so it's like just like the way if you ever do the trivia of, like, what's the origin of TSR and what's that name mean and where it came from.
Yeah.
That's like the way they did that, but instead of looking at historical simulations, actually a system that helps you frame the present. Your digital reality, we'll say,
Gotcha.
rather than your meat space reality, because who you are once you're in this digital screen trance can and cannot be disassociated from what you do in your meat space body.
Do you think is it what's optimal there? Is it better to have a dissociation from your meat space body, or is it better to have it match as closely as possible?
Well, is it better always is tied to a goal or a telos, right?
Right.
I'd say ideally integration, right?
Yeah.
A single coherent
Well,
personality.
let's just like, and you feel free to do the same to me, but let's just use you as an example of like your on screen persona versus now that I've met you in the flesh. I think that there's a lot of
When we met in the flesh, I was mostly embodying my online persona.
Were you?
Yeah, Grim was working. I was at work that whole conference.
That quiet Grim.
Maybe.
That quiet Grim seems more like Grim, right? Yeah, that's. But that was like I actually found that endearing. It's like because I actually this is like I'm not naturally like a super social person either.
It was like I'm quiet 22 hours of the day, and then an hour of it, I perform a ritual and don the persona that is capable of dealing with that, right?
Yeah, I get it.
You can't handle that level of attention. The energy flow of people, like, attention's no joke, and
right,
it'll burn you out.
I think even people who would fall like in the like clearly on the extrovert end of things, even extroverts like have a point of like, okay, that's enough. I think maybe not. I don't know. I am I'm naturally fairly quiet and reserved, but I'm also warm and friendly. That's the weird thing. So it's like I'm not going to initiate in a conversation typically, but once a conversation has been initiated, I'm going to be warm and friendly. So
I do it for as long as I can and then make an Irish exit.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I'm out.
So there was some real Graham. And I noticed these things. That's why I'm bringing it up, because I did notice that contrast. And I think that's like, I think it's somehow, it's clear that now that said, I noticed this contrast. But it was also obvious to me that like, there's an authenticity about what you do when you're in front of a screen too, which is why people like it and they like you. They can sense that.
You put the mask on so you can tell the truth, right?
Here we go. Put the mask on so you can tell the truth. Amen. Oh, that's good.
Oh,
that's good.
But no, but like you could say that like adopting it's not different from a spell effect. Like we can use our gaming framing to understand what's going on in reality in a beneficial way that's cross communicate, that we can communicate across like the people who have gamed substrate. So like holding attention is an ability that lasts, like a spell that lasts for 2 turns or up to 4 turns depending on your level. Like public speaking, those kind of ability, you make a skill check. It's like,
yeah.
If we start using those lenses on things, I think, I don't know, there's a benefit there that I see and I can't elucidate. Maybe it's just to make the skills more transferable, or I don't know. There's a thing to it though. And Hi, Nakama. I can't. Nate won't give me superpowers, and I'm co-hosting off his stream today, so I can't say hi to anybody with clicks.
Oh, how do I do that? I can. Is there a way to do that? I don't.
You just bring them up and say hi to them. You just click on their comment and say, "Hey, person."
Oh yeah. Which one? Which one is it that you wanted to?
When Nakama showed up, Dolly's waving. You know, Dominic is saying some wild things that I think I'm going to need you to translate.
Okay, let's see here what he's saying.
I think starting with Animus is a death dealer.
Animus is a death dealer and must.
Look at that well-groomed picture. That guy. All right, I'm out of coffee, Nate. Bring me back up in a minute.
Okay. Someone who maintains and enforces boundaries, which involves death to roles, relationship with the animus, impulse, or divine masculine, needs its own to own this role because it has to be paired with the anima as life maker. Okay. So, for I guess Grim asked me to translate. So, he is he's essentially he's talking about like what he's talking. The terms he's using come from like Jungian psychology, and they're the masculine and feminine energies and what their roles are, and how they function differently. How many women play RPGs? Okay, it's a minority. Like Slack mentioned, his wife, my sister, plays, and my wife will play occasionally to humor us, but it's not really her thing. I mean, I've like ex coworker who runs games named Emily. So it's I would say it's probably maybe 25%. If maybe that might even be overly optimistic. So, all right, Graham, you ready? All right, all right, good. I'm gonna do the same thing to you because I need to refill my coffee.
Oh dear. Well then, if I'm gonna hold things, I'll roll savings throws for people. Can you? Top left on the bottom of my thing below you.
What do you want me to do?
Well, you're going to get coffee, so you're going to make me full screen, you said?
Oh, okay, yeah. Hold on a second.
There I am. Hey, everybody. Now we're going to do savings throws because this is still on my channel, even though it started on Grail Country. What happens is you get to pick between survival, social, wisdom, or heart. And you get a saving. This is your savings throw against RBS, essentially. If the die roll of the die you chose is over 10, then you take half damage from the BS that follows. And if it's under 10, you take full damage. But I think Nate does. I know we want what's best for you. Survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Choose. Survivalist, nat 20 today. You're going to make it through just fine. Socialist, only a 7. You better get your bonuses. Lovers of wisdom, that's a 4. I don't know. That's a lot of bonuses. Hard folks, you're rocking a 10 though, so you'll be fine. And prime 17 for the Indigo kids. Now, that's essentially how things are resolved in RPGs. Is rather than doing the physics and the math to figure out how things will actually work, we make the die decide, like attacks and stuff. And if it's high enough, then it hits. If it's low enough, it doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. That's for some of you, that may be the closest to playing an RPG you've ever done. Branding, I can't because it's at Nate's house. Oh God. So the character classes in this game I'm talking about are a set of lobster monkey skills. Like there's rider lobster monkeys, clip lobster monkeys, the Reapers and the due dilettantes is the new exciting class. It's the people who actually look into things like 3 levels deep and see what's behind the connections as they move up into the principalities. Okay, that's all. I'm glad you're back.
So, if I can enable it so you can play your branding, I wouldn't mind at all. But I don't know how to do that. If that's possible,
you've used all your slots on. You've used.
Oh right, you have to be an admin. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So the next time I boot somebody from an admin slot, I'll bring you in.
That one guy. No.
I'll tell you what, Graham. And I meant to tell you this the other day. It's like I know you're sitting with 2 strikes. If you ever get nuked, I'll definitely make you an admin and you can come on over.
That'd be cool. Cool. It could happen. I've invited Machu on, and if he comes on and we talk before,
oh boy,
before July 2nd, I'd probably do it.
Yeah.
I don't think we've talked about Christians enough in this, man.
Okay. Well, yeah, I talked about it a bit earlier in my own story. So let's talk about what do you want to talk about? We want to talk about like why the reasons, like historically, why Christians have been suspicious of RPGs. Do we want to just like let that be in the past and like make the case as to why it's not a bad idea? Then Christians should consider doing it if they're interested. What angle do you want to approach this from?
What if the Satanic Panic wasn't all BS? Oh. No, probably not that angle. What?
Well, it's not nothing. Almost nothing is ever all BS. It was certainly like an overreaction, and it was hyperbole. But like, there's like, I think that there's not no linkage between people becoming interested in RPGs and people becoming interested in the occult. So it's not all BS.
Well,
it just doesn't necessarily follow.
No, I think they use the Satanic Panic as an example of a moral contagion, or a social contagion, or a social moral contagion, or is morality the vector of social contagions?
Did you ever watch Mages and Monsters? Which was
yes, I did.
Okay,
that was
kind of like the origin point of like it really getting kicked into full gear is when you had a TV movie with Tom Hanks that portrayed playing Dungeons and Dragons as like basically dangerously psychotic behavior.
RPG means role playing game, Ansel man. And Clint's asking, do Risk and Monopoly count as RPGs? I would say Risk probably. Clue definitely, Nahama. You're playing the role of a detective in the game of Clue, so it does count as an RPG.
Yeah. Well, here's this is the thing I was thinking about. I was probably gonna say I was gonna save this to talk with Richard about, because it's like I think it's probably more his cup of tea than. Are you familiar with how the early church felt about acting?
I'm familiar with them not being fan of men playing women, or just society in general.
Well, they weren't fan of the theater or acting in general for like a long time. It's really only in comparatively modern.
What was the case? What was the case they made against it?
Well, in the case of the early church, the theater was actually associated with the pagan rites of Dionysus. So it was actually like had a religious function. So it was inherently pagan. So that's why the early church didn't like it. And then, and then later,
well, why didn't they like pagan?
It's just viewed as a disreputable occupation for most, well, really for a lot longer than it's been viewed as a reputable one.
You see, but that leans to me in how like words are magic. It's almost like the hypnotic nature of the campfire, right? Like it puts human brains into a different receptive mode, and like to take money to I don't know. I'm seeing that angle, like, of the acting is that, right?
Well, I think like so. It's the question. I think it's like when you're acting, you are making space to
Let another spirit occupy your
yeah,
form.
right. I mean that's what you're doing. Um and uh so I think this is like the I mean that's like probably the deepest reason as to why it was viewed suspiciously. It's this idea of like a bad kenosis which can lead to possession.
I don't know that like things like the Satanic Panic didn't serve to help hide actual rituals.
Interesting.
Like to uphold the illusion
So
that
get people worried about people playing D&D while there's actually much darker things going on that
right. For example, if you look at the Satanic Panic, and then you look at when they let Alex Jones in the Bohemian Grove and to film the cremation of care ritual, right? Juxtapose those two for a second. It's like everything's fine, everything's under control. We're a Christian nation. That's all BS. Meanwhile, like our really powerful people are burning something called care in front of a giant owl in the middle of the woods. What's going on here?
yeah. Yeah. I don't know enough about it to have an informed opinion one way or
You,
the other.
you know nothing about the Bohemian Grove?
Just
Oh,
just the barest. I might have seen a clip here or there, but it's nothing I've looked into with any.
oh, the
I
giant
mean, I've heard it.
owl.
I know it exists. I know that like they supposedly did some kind of ritual, but I don't really know like the details.
But it's okay because we live in a materialist universe where there's no such thing as magic. So the rich and powerful people
So this
doing
is an
some
interesting thing.
LARP ritual doesn't really make any difference,
So
does it?
Gygax was interviewed at the peak of the Satanic Panic, and what he said was interesting because that's actually what Gygax's point was is like, look, I don't believe that magic is real, so for me, I don't think it's any big deal because to me it's not real. If I believed that magic was real, it'd be different. If I were this is the analogy he actually used. If there were a game where people were playing at building a nuclear bomb, I believe in nuclear bombs. I might be a little bit concerned about that.
Interestingly,
So he was like very like sympathetic to like, hey, this is another perspective and a worldview from what I have, and I can see how from this perspective you would be concerned about this. But I don't see it.
I a fun fact: I've decided I believe nuclear bombs are a LARP. So that's interesting. What does this have to do with Denim? Well, in Dungeons and Dragons and in most RPGs, Denim gives you a +1 to your armor class that standard cloth does not. It's more resistant to stabbing injuries, you see. I thought Nate would be au fait with lots of more esoteric occult stuff than what does au fait even mean? Yes, I am sitting on a throne of denim.
Are you really?
Well, it's a throne covered in denim, at least, for the purposes of our war. Make America honest again. Choose denim.
How did this thing start? But it's hilarious. But how did it start?
It started. Kale started. He decided he hated denim, and wanted. And I think he was just like brown nosing to the parents of his Ivy League students with this whole shenanigans. But Paul Renee Nichols decided that it would not stand. It would not stand. And once that battle began, everybody started choosing sides. And I don't think anybody has chosen Kale's side, but No,
I have tried to maintain a conscientious objector status because I actually see your point, like Grim, and I also see Kale's point because it's like I don't really wear denim. I don't.
That's because it's for working people, people that.
Well, I used to be a line cook, dude. It's like
I
come from
work
working
too.
class. So, although I didn't really wear jeans when I was a line cook. They're not that comfortable on the line. You need something that's more breathable. Yeah, exactly. They're too warm. Maybe that's why I developed a distaste for denim. So here's an example of so this is a working class occupation that is not associated with denim at all. So, in any case, I get your point. I think that it's undeniably iconic. I mean, you can John Wayne wears blue jeans. I think that pretty much is that is America, right? So if John Wayne does John Wayne does it, therefore it's American. So I see your point, but I also share Kale's aesthetic distaste for denim personally. And I went to a college that had a dress code, and there were no jeans allowed. So
why not?
It was just it was part of trying to create an atmosphere on the campus where students would take their studies seriously. So it was a college environment that was actually, we had a curfew, there was a dress code.
So if you need to LARP that you're serious, you can't wear the uniform of the comfortable, hardworking man. No, see, we're getting down to the.
I was trying to get there, Grim, because there's a thing. It's we have to accept that part of being an American is that we have abysmal taste, and we need to own it and be proud of it.
No.
But it's true. We do.
Denim is not abysmal taste, sir.
No, it's so is American cheese, but it's delicious. Who cares?
I do.
It's in poor taste.
We have to start holding ourselves to a higher standard, honestly, and that standard is the standard of denim. But can you wear your slacks for 8 days in a row? No, because they're not denim.
There is that. Yeah, jeans you hardly have to wash.
Civilization itself is mostly LARPing. You go to a ballroom, right? You're dressed up as a ballroom. You LARP as a ballroom attendee. I don't know. I think we're off the rails now, but we're 90 minutes deep. We're off the rails,
so we couldn't resist the Denim Wars sidetrack.
Oh no, Oswald is on to Kale's secret agenda. Look at that. Grab it. What's the last thing Oswald said there? That is Kale's agenda.
I like khakis.
It's
warm today, so I'm actually wearing. It's warm today, so I'm actually wearing. I'm wearing shorts. They are not denim shorts.
Well, the Shadow Cabal hasn't provided me with an appropriate jean budget, so I'm wearing the same thing I was 2 years ago. But I have one for over the chair. That's the thing.
I want to try to get this back. I would like to say I was trying to be honest about let's admit that not all the Satanic Panic was entirely crazy, that there are reasons for Christians to come to role-playing games with some reservations, and that I would say that not every role-playing game is appropriate for a Christian to play. Because some of them... Go ahead.
I wouldn't base it on the game, but the campaigns I've played with you in Slack, no, you guys don't want Christians in there. Because you're not supposed to kill the other player characters. And, there's been at least 3 of my characters that have wanted to kill the other characters in the party for their heinous satanic act.
Yeah, I think part of that is but that is the game though, because it's like DCC is you're kind of what your character has is kind of determined by dice. It's random, and you get what you get. And that's what it is. Like I would have had left to my own devices. Would I be playing a Viking wizard whose patron is the Mother of Crows? That cannibalizes.
Yes, I almost
their
killed
dead
Nate's
companions.
I decided that I didn't like his character eating the corpse of the other guy.
No, I would much rather have played a warrior and a straightforward warrior. That's more my thing. But it's what I got, and because it's random, and that's the game. And John runs game. John, or excuse me, I shouldn't use his real name. Whoops.
That's a good way of doing self-exploration of your shadow, I think. Especially if you're given a character and you don't get to pick it, but
as long as you keep it, but I think you don't want to get too into it. You want to keep an appropriate distance in order for it to be that. I agree with you. I think it can be appropriate exploration of your shadow, but you don't want to let it overcome. I mean, you don't want to be overtaken by your shadow, so you don't want to give into it too much. So you want to kind of like when you're playing that kind of character, I think you want to keep some distance.
Well, if you've been overtaken by your shadow, do you think role-playing games could lead you back to the integration of your light?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, it should work in reverse if it does the other way.
That's a very interesting question. And I don't have an answer to that. I just think that I definitely think they're like psychologically healthy, for sure. And that they help you like build all kinds of skills, and they're good for people, and Christians are people. So, but but here's the thing. It's like, I have no problem with Christians not wanting to play certain games or styles of games that have elements that make them uncomfortable. I think that's perfectly fine.
Well, okay, but I'll say that like
it goes. By the way, that goes the other way. That goes the other way. There's like I design games that are like full of all kinds of like explicitly like Christian allegory that certain people don't want to play because they know that the things that I'm running are full of Christian allegory. And my favorite game is Pendragon. And in Pendragon, everybody plays a Christian. Well, you can be a pagan, but most people are Christian knights. So,
what would if we had Christian knights today? How would we recognize them?
I think we always have. There's always Christian knights. They're like the
Jesuits.
No, I think they're just regular. I think they're just regular Christian men that are just like doing good things in the world, that are like raising their family well and protecting their children and supporting their family and being.
You're not a knight unless you get knighted.
Being good employees. Knighthood reflects the concept of nobility, of a noble soul. And I think we've that's a good thing. It's like we no longer think that nobility of soul is tied to heredity. So that's a good direction we've moved in. But knighthood is still useful for understanding the idea of the noble soul who's fighting the good fight. Even if that's decoupled from heredity, which it ought to be, actually. I think we've just.
Do they wear denim?
Do they wear denim? Yes, American knights are cowboys, and therefore they wear denim.
I'm not gonna lie. I've honestly considered contacting a uniform place to see if we could get denim uniforms. I think we could do this into a full-on thing. A cult. Like, there's the show called The Leftovers, which is as appealing as the show's way better than the name would entail.
The Leftovers.
Yeah, and it's got a cult in it, and they always wear white, and that's not appealing to me. But I think a cult that always wear
Are
denim.
you saying that denim should become the uniform of TLC?
No, of a special character class within TLC.
Oh,
Within TLC.
Oh, okay. The American Knight.
Yeah. Whoa. Wow.
There we go.
Yeah.
What's my character class, Grim, in your system?
In the well, you're a ship captain because you're running a channel, so that's already that, and I see it. I see that easy. I don't know that you subclass as far as that goes.
I'm just a straight captain, huh?
Jeez. No, I just haven't developed the game that far enough.
Oh, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Like scholarly archetype.
Yeah, I've got that. I mean, I just know escaping that for me. I like when I was in grade school, they called me the absent-minded professor.
That was the first, when I was a small child watching television with my grandma, that was the first character I resonated with, was Jerry Lewis's version of the absent-minded professor.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, Jerry Lewis. Wow. I haven't even thought about Jerry Lewis in so long.
Let's wrap this up with as much as we know about the rumored stream of TLC people playing an RPG, including your Thursday guest, Richard Rowland.
Right. So I haven't had a chance to talk to him and work out. Have you talked to him to work out details yet?
No, but he tweeted that he was in.
And yeah, he did. Enough. He did seem to indicate approval, and so I will take it upon myself to, when I talk to him on Thursday, probably off camera, to try to get a commitment out of that. But I think, I think this is a good idea. I've actually wanted. I suggested way back. I tried to get Paul in on the idea.
He is also soft committed. Okay. By not saying no in the comment section when I referenced it. He replied with something that wasn't a no. So we might have this. It's a very ephemeral thing that could collapse. But right now, it's looking like Paul Vanderclay, Nate from Grail Country, Richard Rowland, and probably me, DM'd by a masochistic.
This guy.
Slackarius doing a Dwaro. How do you say
Dwaro deep?
Dwaro.
It basically is Greg Gillespie is the guy who, it's his homage to Moria and Middle Earth, but with a lot more humor.
And so that's on the table to happen. Please, if you're watching this and one of those people, bug us about it. Build the hype. It can be a thing.
But definitely.
If we invest.
Help us pressure these folks into standing by their commitments.
Accountability stalking, the most underdeveloped class.
You can't like a tweet without consequences. If we've learned anything in today's culture, it's like liking a tweet has consequences.
Yes. And he replied with a gift that he was in, so I'm sure about him. Getting
sure.
Paul to set us aside 3 hours is hard, but as you mentioned, if he'll do it for Chris Kavanaugh, he should do it for Dwaro Deep.
Yeah, that had to. Yeah, exactly. He definitely should. Because this would actually be fun. I can't imagine he was having fun the entire time.
We can definitely imagine that. We have to, but we do. We imagine that was a very pleasant experience. All right, I'm gonna run away.
This
now,
was great.
Man.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This was fabulous.
Bye, everybody.